Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Americans in Paris. I'm Stephen Heiner with my co-host Molly Sebrier. It's my turn to host the live, and apparently, when I host the live, we start 10 minutes late. Totally my fault, not Molly's. Today, we're going to be talking about something that doesn't care about time, i.e., wine, cheese, chocolate. Doesn't matter if you're punctual. And I think one of my biggest misconceptions moving to France is, well, of course, the French know everything about wine, chocolate, cheese. Like they own all this stuff. And I remember one time very early, it could have been my first or second month in France, Paris, asking a French friend, about this particular wine, and they sort of shrugged their shoulders. And it wasn't anything obscure, something like a burger, like, do you know this region? Or it's like, "Pfft." And the French, they have this wonderful sound that we don't have in American English, which is so this sound indicates they have no earthly idea. That is what that sound means in French. If you were to make that sound in English, people would look at you somewhat strange, like, what did something happen? Like, did you get something caught in your throat? Like, what was that noise? But it has a very simple, easy to communicate, and it's just something you learn over time that you don't learn in French class. When the French go, it means they have no idea what you're talking about. So that was the beginning of my education that no, Virginia, the French do not know everything about wine, chocolate, and cheese. What was your experience, Molly?
So, somewhat similar, but like with a caveat, I would say. So, I definitely had the same assumption that would know everything. Um, the most people, I feel like most French people that I know and most French friends that I have, they do know quite a bit about wine and cheese, at least definitely way more than I do. My husband, as you know, Stephen, is a French pastry chef, so obviously he knows all you need to know about chocolate, like the exact temperature to boil it at to turn it into melted chocolate, all of that kind of stuff. He jokes all the time that when you train to become a French pastry chef, it's more like training to become a chemist or a scientist or something like that because they're so precise compared to American baking. But I digress. So I definitely did have that assumption about wine and cheese, and it was pretty much proven to be true. But I feel that like my scale of knowledge maybe is more forgiving than yours just because I know nothing about wine or cheese. So if like a French person is like, "Oh yeah, like a burgundy goes great with red meat." I'm like, "Wow, you're so knowledgeable." And the same sort of thing with cheese. But maybe I just got lucky and my friends, I have to admit, my group of friends are very, very into food and wine, very, very passionate about it. It's really fun when we go on a vacation as a group,
Well,
definitely.
I mean, I think that's the thing. It's easy to be passionate about it once you've experienced it, but if you haven't and it's something intellectual, it can be easy to, I think, classify as snobby. And I
Mm,
totally get that,
mhm.
right? Although Americans can be just as snobby about beer, right?
Yes,
Talk
yeah.
about microbrews, and you have to have a beard and you have to have certain tattoos in order to discuss it, eloquently. But I think with wine, it can feel elevated and it can feel beyond most people's grasp. And I understand what you're saying there. And I think that was the difference is it once you've had a chance to experience and learn, there's levels of appreciation that come forth. If you've been, it's with same with beer. If you've been educated about hops and then afterwards you taste this beer, you're like, can you taste the hops? You're like, oh, I didn't know that's what it was. Like, yes, I can taste it. And then it's like, well, do you like that? And
Mhm,
what the end result is not to be snobby about beer or wine. It's to know what it is that you like. That's the
mhm,
end goal.
mhm.
And to understand, well, do you like this wine? And not just sort of say it tastes good. Like, I don't know whether I like you should know whether you like it.
Yeah.
It's fine that it tastes good, but do you like it and why do you like it? I think that's important in any aspect of life. I say that as, somebody who's been on a Philly cheesesteak um, quest this year, 20 Philly, 20 cheesesteaks down. I have a very good impression of what it is that I want out of a cheesesteak. So taking it way down from French wine and cheese. So this whole live stream was inspired by this aha moment. Recently, I was with some friends after mass at church, and they'd said, "Well, Stephen, what's your favorite champagne?" And I think this was an American, and she was thinking I was going to say like a brand,
Mhm.
you know. And so I said non-ironically, not it was just a reaction. I said, well, what region, what particular, and then they're like, oh, okay, it's gonna be one of those. And I said, no, no, no. She's like, well, I thought if it's only from the Champagne region, then I said, that's true, but what part of the Champagne region? And I realized when those words came out of my mouth, I thought, all right,
Well,
I'm just
that's
gonna shut up.
like proverbial mic drop. Like,
Right, right,
oh, like the Champagne department, but which region or
right,
whatever
right,
it is.
right. And then realizing there's also different parts. There is actually some parts that are backfilled that are considered part of the region, even though they're, I think, actually a little bit outside the region, and they're classified as Champagne, even though it's not. Like, I think near parts of the Seine actually still holds this AOP or AOC designation, and so
Mhm.
they can also call themselves that. You learn there's something called Crémant, which is, the sparkling wine that cannot be called, shall not be called. You'll be prosecuted if you try. Um, and I was leading tour groups to Reims and Epernay. So that's the region that we're talking about. And I was just trying stuff. And it's like anything, you've got to try a lot of stuff before you find out about it. And as you try it, you learn. Yes, you could go with a book and say, here's the book about champagne, and you're reading about bubbles or whatever else for the process, but you've got to taste it.
Mhm.
Um, and so for me, why I wanted to talk about this today is just share a little bit about the journey and use it backwards for anything. It doesn't have to be French wine, cheese, and chocolate. It could be American beer, hot dogs, and jambalaya.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, the passion is for learning the roots of where the cuisine came from and then finding out if you like it or not.
Mhm.
And then it may change for you. So some people may, like me, react and find their wine knowledge deepened, and then being able to own an unpopular opinion. So I'll give you one, Molly. See if you
Okay.
can match my unpopular opinion.
Okay.
It is real lowbrow in France to admit that you like rosé, right? But
Yes.
when summertime comes around, I drink rosé unapologetically. I
Yes.
don't drink it any other time of the year. For me, it's a summer drink. It just feels that way to me. I associate rosé with summer in France. And I am unapologetic. The number of French people who've like, you drink rosé? Of course they say they don't say it like that. But unpopular opinion, the reason I got comfortable with that is I kept drinking rosé in Provence or from Provence or associating, and I enjoyed it. The number of summer days I've been in the south of France and drank rosé, that memory is there. It's golden for me. And so when I have rosé in the north of France in summer, I'm still taken back to Provence, and I still taste those flavors, and it's an easy drink for me. It's not fancy. And so for the French, I think sometimes they have to overcome their own programming and say, well, I'm not allowed to like rosé, which is why I have to tell Steven he's an idiot for liking rosé. But here I can stand and say, I've drunk enough rosé to admit that I like rosé,
Mhm.
and I will not be shamed into not drinking rosé.
That is very white girl energy of you. It's so funny. So to kind of like follow this tangent of rosé. So the French are maybe even more appalled by the idea of putting ice in wine, like a white wine, like white zin.
Right.
But but they will put ice in rosé and they'll call it une piscine, so like a pool. So and to your point, Stephen, it is a very summery drink, and that's the only time my French friends, my French in-laws, my French husband will also drink rosé. We only really do the piscine if we're at like on a terrace, like outside at a restaurant or something like that. I think my in-laws, like my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, would maybe have a conniption if I tried to put ice in wine in front of them. And then another sort of tangent on rosé, as someone who is fairly unknowledgeable when it comes to wine. So this is just something to keep in mind if you do like rosé and you're shopping for it, go for the lightest colored rosé you can find. That's the best kind. it's light in flavor, but it also means it's not like too sugary. I can find some of the darker rosés to be much, much too sugary. And my husband will tell you that like they add additional stuff in there to give them that color. So I wouldn't recommend a bright pink rosé as cute as it looks in the bottle. Um, I'm trying to think of an unpopular opinion.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
interesting that the French are so ahead with bio in other things, but
mhm,
the organic wine is the new thing in France, and
yes.
biodynamique, and that whole respect of the seasonality and when I'm going to be growing stuff. That's new actually in France, and actually it's an exciting part of learning more about wine.
There, so that kind of brings something to mind. I was in Bordeaux visiting friends in January, and that's like the, wine capital of France, even for French people.
And and
And
and, and insert here for people who are not moved to France yet. You too one day will say, "Well, I was visiting my friends in Bordeaux in January." You too one day will be as snobby as Molly.
yes, yes. I know. It's like sometimes I say certain things without thinking how they're actually going to sound to like other people. But so I was in, the top place to try wine, to taste wine, with a friend of mine who is a sommelier, um, at a restaurant in Bordeaux. So like a sommelier, but like a level above maybe some that are in Paris, just because he's in Bordeaux. And while there is definitely this idea of wanting to learn and be curious for French people, I think at their core, they are purists in many different ways. So something that's been becoming more and more popular, and it must have originated in the States, but like non-alcoholic wine. And the sommelier was like totally appalled with this idea. And he was like,
Probably
it's,
personally insulted.
oh, so personally insulted. And like, it's becoming so popular in France that like people are coming into restaurants in Bordeaux and asking for this wine. And so the place that he's working at asked him if he thought that it was a good idea to carry it. And he was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And interestingly enough, in the group of people he was saying this to was a French friend of mine who doesn't drink. He's not a drinker, doesn't really have big problems with it, but it's just not something that he enjoys in his lifestyle. And so he was kind of playing the devil's advocate, like, well, I want to be able to go to a wine bar with my friends and get a glass of non-alcoholic wine. And the sommelier basically was like, well, you need to go to another restaurant or like,
You need to go to another country.
right, like get out of my wine bar asking for non-alcoholic wine. So funny.
Well, the idea of en principe, that I don't want to leave wine, but I'm going to make a bridge to cheese just for a second, because very famously, and I don't think I'm the only one who noticed this tweet years ago. The editor of The Local, which if you don't know about The Local, it's a online newspaper that runs in different countries. So there's a local for Germany, there's a local for Switzerland, there's a local for France. Very valuable, lots of great insights. The editor, um, had recounted in a Twitter thread an interaction he'd had with a fromager, and he'd gone in asking questions, and effectively he was talking about raclette. For those who don't know, raclette, the French will not allow the Swiss to claim it as Swiss. The Swiss will insist that it's theirs. It's really just an Alpine dish, okay? And there's lots of Alpine countries. Let them fight it out. Don't get involved. That it is potatoes, boiled potatoes with melted cheese, and sometimes meat, sometimes pickles. Depends on the situation.
Your dream meal, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a tartiflette guy, but raclette's a close second in that category of food. And uh, he was asking about raclette cheese, and so the fromager is like, oh, this is like, and he's like, but what? I say, oh, no, you would never use that cheese for raclette, like. And he didn't elaborate. He just basically said it's illegal, right? And so the guy continues to make conversations. Okay, well, I'm going to take that cheese. And the guy says, well, what are you going to use it for? And he goes, for raclette. And the guy goes, no. And he refused to sell it to him. He refused to sell it to him. And the guy came on Twitter and told the story. And it is, for me, the quintessence of France, that
Yes.
interaction, that I don't care about the money. I care about the rightness of the universe. And what is morally sinful, what is incompatible with life, is that you would use this cheese for this purpose. That is wrong. It is illegal. It falls along. How do you cut that cheese? That cheese must be cut in a certain way. It must be cut with a certain device. And if you don't, you are wronging our ancestors. As people from a country that's been around for 5 minutes, we don't have that same sense of tradition and ancestry. And so the wrong attitude, and I'm going to say this is the wrong attitude to take, is one of scoffing or like, oh, excuse me, Mr. Serious. That is the wrong attitude to take. The attitude should be of curiosity, wonderment, like, wow, I didn't realize you got to take it so seriously. Like, educate me.
Yeah.
Have that student mind.
Mhm.
But if you want to perpetuate the American stereotype, do that reaction that I just said, oh, excuse me, Mr. Serious, and play down the things that they consider important in their culture.
Mhm.
Do that if you want to do the wrong thing.
It brings up one of my favorite stories of my very, very early years in France. Which if you watched my video, you would know this. But when I came over way back when in 2014, I was an
Let's
au
plug
pair.
for Molly's origin video, which you can find on the channel.
Yes. And for my second video coming out this week, that's going to be all about how to become an au pair. But so when I first came over, I was an au pair, and I lived with and worked for a Franco-American family. So the mother was American and the father was French. And I was brought over for the fact that I was American. Like, they wanted their children to speak in American English, to have the American English accent. The mom had been in France for so long that she preferred to speak in French with the kids, which was funny. But so basically, it was fine that I knew nothing about French culture. It was fine that I didn't know the language. And it was fine that I was, coming over as my very American self at the time. And to set the scene, the very first day I got there, they sent a taxi to come pick me up from the airport. And then I arrive, and my host dad comes out to greet me. And I see him coming towards me. And so I give him a big bear hug, like wrap him in my arms, like the look on his face.
I'm horrified by imagining it.
I mean, the look
and Molly goes, I'm a hugger.
Like, am I though, or am I just being a naive American? Like,
that's the thing, is you're not, but that would have been the thing that you would have said to contextualize it. But with the French,
the look on his face was very similar to that. And also too, I'm just so excited to be there. I'm back in France to live this time. I'm just so excited. I'm coming off of, I can't remember now, but I'm sure it was a red eye. They sent this random taxi to come pick me up. Like, emotions were very high. And that was my first sort of like snafu. And like, looking back on it now, I'm like, okay, he was waiting for la bise. Like, that's why he approached me in that way. And then, less than a week later, on the very first Sunday I was there, we had our first Sunday dinner as a family, and they pulled out all the stops because they wanted to, show me French food, what French Sunday supper was like. And everything was delicious. And they come out with the cheese plate at the end of the meal. And I'm the guest of honor. So the plate is like just presented in front of me. And again, I'm just so happy to be there. I'm so excited. I'm getting to know these people. And they hand me the knife and I start cutting into the cheese. And it was literally like, that was the look on the dad's face, because I can't remember all the details now, but I'm sure it was like a triangle shaped cheese, and I was just like slicing it right in half down the middle or something. And I kid you not, I think I heard like an audible gasp from the dad.
You're saying this and everyone's like, oh, come on, you all can't be serious. But you have to realize, we're coming from a culture in which I've seen on social media people spell it as charcuterie, like the animal shark cuterie. And so for them, that idea of like, it's meat, it's cheese, it's whatever, that's fine. That works in America. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But in France, it's a whole ritual. Yeah. There's even a question of like, well, I got a bunch of sheep cheese. Like, should I get cow cheese? Yeah. Or, we have bread versus this. we still have dessert coming. Like, how much
Mhm,
cheese should I eat?
mhm.
That there are all these things, and you're not required to learn them. And we're not. I'm hoping that Molly and I are not giving you the impression that you need to learn it before you go. But what I'm hoping that we're inculcating in today's conversation is that student mind, that I'm going there with humility. I'm observing other people. I'm looking at how they're doing things, and then I make a note. And I'm not afraid to ask, like, is
Mm,
there a specific way I should cut the cheese?
mhm.
There is literally a specific way to do it,
Yeah.
and it's different. The way you cut Comté is different from the way that you would cut Brie.
Mhm,
That's just how it is.
mm,
Um, and so I'm making these faces because I'm imagining the French reaction, because I spent a decade with the French and I know what their reaction would be. And we can laugh about it as Americans,
mhm.
but we're laughing about it because we're laughing at ourselves. We're not laughing that the French would react that way. It
Yeah.
totally makes sense in their system, because there's a way of doing things and there's a tradition. And when you subvert that, what you're ultimately showing, knowingly or no, is a disrespect for that. And
Mhm,
that is a capital crime in France,
mhm.
a disrespect for tradition. And that's something that matters more in France, in Japan, in other countries in which there's a deep and beloved tradition, than in other places where there is no tradition. We'll
Mm.
say, well, there is no way to do things. And sometimes you'll find that the locals will subvert your expectations. I remember being in Barcelona, being on the subway and watching kids with Sprite and basically like some cheap wine, and they were making sangria
Yeah.
and drinking it on the subway. And that messes with your mind to think, oh, sangria is this thing where, you take this and you do this and, add this amount of ice. And sure, I'm sure there's a technique, but what the locals were showing me was, yeah, but if I'm a kid and I don't have any money, it's Sprite and this like wine mixer,
Yeah.
whatever it is, on the subway. And so be willing to respect tradition, but also realize there are locals who are subverting that tradition as well.
Mhm.
And you have to decide how you feel about that. Doesn't mean it's right because they're doing it, but it gives you more context.
And I think this
And
brings
I'm,
up
I'm still here. I'm just going to plug this in. So keep talking.
I think this really brings up a larger topic and a larger conversation of the fact that the French culture, living in France, you realize they are a very ritualistic people, very traditional people, and no, Americans aren't like that at all, but that's like the point of going to a foreign country, right? Of experiencing something new. And I do encourage, like exactly what Steven said, I encourage everyone watching to understand and know you don't have to know everything before you get over there, but it's respect the ritual. I actually coincidentally just published an article on theamericaninparis.com about the ritual of the apéro, which can involve wine and cheese as well. So it kind of ties into this conversation, but it is very ritualistic and very different from the way we do things in the United States. And I think, especially when I first came over to France, that was what attracted me most about France was the ritual, the tradition, the slowness of it all. Like, yes, there's a deliberate way to cut the cheese. You take your time. You don't just take any old butter knife and start digging into the
Right, and
block.
there's a reason for it. It isn't arbitrary, like, oh, we made it up in the 1300s.
Yeah.
It's because this way everyone gets I'm thinking of one particular, Molly. I'm thinking of, let's say, Brie, for example,
Yeah.
that you want everyone to get, let's say, every type of surface of that cheese.
Mhm.
Whereas if you cut the nez with the nose of the cheese, what you're doing is you're greedily taking
The
this
best, the best
slice
part.
for yourself and depriving everyone else of that chance of so that cheese. And now I'm getting nerdy about cheese, but that type of cheese slopes, and so a lot of that cream can come to the front of that cheese. And so if you take it, you're like taking a lot of that cream for yourself.
Mhm, mhm.
Or with Conte, the way that it is, you cut it like it's a bâtonnet. What am I thinking, Molly? What's the English
Like
word?
a stick, like
Like a
a,
stick.
yeah.
This is what happens. The other problem is when you speak other languages, you forget your own language.
Yes.
Um, so you're cutting it like a stick, and that's how Conte is cut. Why? I didn't make the rules.
Yeah.
This is how they do it, and I suppose with Conte it looks even all the way throughout. So I think they're making an even cut. And the way that cheese is, you need wire to cut it well. Unless you have a particular type of cheese knife, wire is the best way to cut Conte. Um, but now we're getting into favorite cheeses. So
Yes.
So, Molly, I grew up in Asia.
Yes.
We don't eat cheese in Asia normatively. So it may play some part in some dessert dish or some obscure thing. I'm not speaking for all Asians. I'm just saying, growing up in Singapore, cheese, milk were not a key part. We had condensed milk to sweeten coffee or
Mm.
for desserts, but milk and cheese were not a big part of my life. So coming to America, I remember watching with wide eyes as my like 15-year-old cousin drank a full glass of milk.
Like the
I
full
had never,
pint glass of milk that we used to drink at
I had
dinner.
never seen such a thing, and I was, I was a 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid, and I thought, wow, people drink milk. And for me, it wasn't that it was nasty or disgusting. It was not. I wasn't habituated to doing that.
Yeah.
So I had to learn. And to this day, milk drinking is not a habit. It's normally attached to something. So with cookies, I have milk, or after some spicy food, I might have some milk. But I
Mm.
I've never been able to overcome the fact that I didn't. Now, what is different is with cheese. So in America, cheese, I would say, is playing a greater and greater role. Growing up, I think there's always been cheese awareness. We have cheeseburgers, for example, made out of plastic cheese. But we Americans like cheese, and there's a really good. There's a In fact, I would say cheese is going through its microbrew renaissance now that
Mm, mhm.
years ago, like American beer went through. And now American cheese, I mean, you can find some really great American cheese in different places now, but there's more of a respect and appreciation for it. When I came to France, I think I came with the basic American knowledge and appreciation of cheese, very surface level. I like it, I don't like it. And you come to this country, you think you know cheese, you don't even know the beginning of cheese.
Mm.
And always jokingly, raw milk cheese is illegal in America, right? Because we know that's what's dangerous. Not like children like getting shot in school. That's not a problem. But what is problematic is making sure that those children, before they shoot up the school, don't have access to raw milk cheese because that might push them over the top. And so a lot of the cheese in France is raw milk based. You don't realize what that means unless you've had raw milk, first of all, and then you've had it in a cheese form. The levels are not conceivable. I mean, I don't even know how to think or talk about it until you've had it. Once you've done that, and once you get into, you could say, the cheese culture, little pun on that, is realizing there are so many different cheeses from so many different regions and they tie to that area. So Normandy cheeses are going to be cow cheeses. They're going to be soft. They're going to go well with apples because that's what else they grow in Normandy. They don't grow wine. They don't grow grapes in Normandy. So apple and their cheese need to go. That means it's soft, it's mild. There are no aggressive, you know, street alley cheeses in Normandy. Like those are in the mountains. Like if you want to get into, if you want to bring some thug cheeses with you, like go into the mountains, like go into rocky areas of France, and those are your thug cheeses. I didn't know about any of that stuff. And
Yeah.
part of that is this sort of aggressive gastronomy. When you think about France, like the mild stuff is sausages,
Mm.
whatever it might be, but aggressive gastronomy, like eating snails, oysters, tête de veau,
Mm.
this is where you need to open yourself up to stuff. And so you might say, oh, well, gosh, that smells horrible. Student mind,
Mhm.
try stuff. If you don't like it, you will have found out by tasting it. And even by tasting it, you'll have learned something and say, what is it that you don't like? Because it wasn't the smell, right? No, I don't like how salty it is.
Mhm.
Whereas that's the number one thing. Like my brain just goes off like, does that mean it's a blue cheese? You gotta bring on that salt. And so whatever flavor profiles that you like, they're going to be summarized by the cheeses that you like. And the cheeses that you like will be summarized by the experiences you've had in France, the opportunities you've had. Maybe you're a big sheep's cheese person. Why is that? Did
Mm.
you spend some time in the mountains? Did you spend some time with somebody who really liked that? And so I wanted to segue that, Molly, to say, what are some cheeses that are favorites of yours now that you didn't even know existed before you came to France?
Oh, well, I think before I came to France, the only French cheese I knew about was brie, to be honest with you. I it's funny that I'm married to a chef now because I definitely wouldn't consider myself super, super knowledgeable with food and cooking and culinary stuff, but I'll try anything kind of thing. And that was always my mindset in France as well. Um, and so, I mean, my favorite cheese of all time, if we want to start with that one, also kind of talking about a salty cheese, is Salers. I don't know if you've ever tried it, Stephen, but it is my absolute favorite. A, for the taste. It is salty, but it's not as strong as a blue. I'm not a blue person, and I'll share why in a second. Um, it is not super, super hard. Like you can easily cut into it, but I wouldn't call it a soft cheese. And it is also from the area where my husband's family is from. So it has more special meaning for
Mm.
me.
I have
Um,
not tried it, but you've now put it on my list.
it is so good. And yeah, like in the same breath, it reminds me of like family apéro, like at the family countryside home that my in-laws have. Um, that's my absolute favorite. And I feel like even some French people don't know too much about Salers. Like they haven't maybe tried it either. And I think it's because it's from this sort of obscure region where my husband's family is from.
And this, I wouldn't say this is a failing of the French, but this is a tendency of the French. They, like all of us in the world, get into our ruts of preference.
Yes.
So I like that. That's what I order. No one goes into a restaurant they've been in many times and says, "Oh, today I'm going to try something I've never tried before."
Mhm,
That's a
mhm,
worldwide thing. That's not a French thing. So
totally.
you can tease the French a little bit about that, but that's not a French trait. That's a worldwide trait that we get into comfortable ruts. But one of the ways to subvert that is for you to try stuff, takes you out of your comfort zone, and learn more about yourself.
Mhm, mhm.
And so, as Molly alluded to, why is it that you don't like blue?
So I like have always loved a good blue cheese sauce, like a blue cheese dressing, which, you say that to a French person and they're like, hmm? That's not blue cheese. And so, but then you go to France and someone puts something like a Roquefort in front of you and it's literally green and blue and like you can see the mold. So that in and of itself sort of intimidated me. But like I said, I'm a curious person. I've been very curious ever since I moved to France, all that stuff. So I tried it when I was an au pair and I was like, okay, this isn't my favorite, but it's not disgusting. And then like it's nothing. It could have been any cheese, I'll say. So I took care of 3 children when I was an au pair, and when I first arrived, the oldest was an 8-year-old girl, and I feel like that's an awkward age for most children. And so she's like full on in her awkward stage, teeth a little bit too big for her mouth kind of vibe, and I was her nanny. I was her nunu. I was with her every single day. So she was just as comfortable with me as she was with her family or her parents. And she had this thing, this after school snack thing, which is very not French of her, I have to say. French people eat cheese after dinner. That's kind of like when they eat it. She would go into the fridge, pick up the Roquefort with her bare hands.
Ah bon?
Ah bon, and eat it that way. And so with her like 2 big teeth in her mouth, the cheese like falling all over her hands,
Crumbling Roquefort.
all over her face. Like the image is burned into my
So
memory.
you now you can't even.
No, no. And it's so funny because my husband and my in-laws make fun of me for it because it's like they know the story and they know why I don't like it. And they're always like, Molly, you want some? And I'm just like, no.
Oh,
Maybe one day I'll go back. I haven't been an au pair since 2015? It's 10 years. So maybe enough time has passed where I can try it. But I do admit, like every time I see it, even seeing like the word Roquefort written down, I'm like, ugh,
oh, you poor thing. You poor thing.
yeah.
Girl didn't have the sense to reach for a Le Vache qui rit, cheese. Um, all right. So I now have a recommendation from you. Um, and I was going to say, what do you think the cheeses that we like say about us? I do think that you can learn. I'm not a cheese whisperer, but just knowing from myself what I'm picking, depending on the meal, depending on how I'm feeling, for anyone paying attention, they would be able to tell things about me
Mm, mhm.
from the cheeses that I pick.
Okay.
And you have to keep in mind that's also a discipline yourself. The rule is in France, you can take as many cheeses as you want from the cheese plate.
Mhm.
But what is the rule behind that? You better finish it all.
Yeah.
Like, do not take cheese from the cheese plate if you're not going to finish it. And that means you could cut 8 very small slices, but you better eat all of those, or at
Mhm.
least you need to try them. The French are not going to require you to like them,
Mhm.
but they are going to say if you cut a piece of the cheese, you better try that piece of cheese.
Mhm.
And you can eat it as is. You can smear it onto bread. Very rarely I've seen crackers.
No.
That's more of an American thing. I
Yeah,
have
it's
seen it here
yeah.
and there, but most of the time it's going to be bread, and you're
Mhm.
going to smear it on the bread. But that's
Mhm.
not required. It's just I would say habitual. I'd say 85% of the time I'm eating cheese in France, it's going to be with bread. That's just
But then you get into the trap of, oh, I have more cheese on my plate. I guess I better take more bread.
this is
Oh, I
very
have more
this,
bread left over. Better take more cheese. And then
this,
you throw wine into there, and you'll never stop.
this is a very famous trap. It's the same with the milk and cookies. Like, oh, I've got more milk left. I should probably get another cookie. Oh, gosh, I have another cookie here. I should probably get some more milk.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's the kind of trap that you want to get put into, not now during Lent, but in Easter time
Yeah.
when you can celebrate. I mean, there's certainly no cheese and cookies for me right now for another 12 days. But I think that when you think about these cheeses, and I was looking at some of my favorite cheeses before the show, I realized there are some that I get to have it both ways. And the
Okay.
example I was thinking of, Molly, is Molbier,
I love
right?
it.
I get my mold,
Mhm.
but I get my soft, creamy cheese, and I also get some rind.
Mhm.
That's something else too. Is some French people? I remember the first time I saw someone cut rind, and I'm
Mm.
like, is that legal? Because it's the way of taking peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in America. You cut the crusts off, and you
Mhm.
think, okay, that's fine, that's for kids. And then I watched a French person cut rind, and I thought, okay, so it's legal.
Yeah.
Like,
Depending on the cheese.
right. Obviously, some of the teeth rinds are not edible, so
Yeah.
they have to be cut.
Mhm.
But sometimes they are edible, and French choose not to.
Mhm.
And that could be a philosophical debate, or it could be taking them back to childhood and grandma and some horrible story, right?
Yeah.
So be careful what you ask the French about. It can get dark very quickly because they'll tell you. That's the whole
They
thing.
will. They will.
The French will be reserved, but if you're eating dinner with them, they're gonna tell you what they think. I remember a dinner
The
party.
French are reserved until they're not, and then
Right
they're
on.
definitely
Yeah.
not.
This may be my third year in France, fourth year. I'm at a dinner party. I'm a royalist. I'm sitting across the table. There's a communist across the table, and then let's say a Républicain. And we're all chatting quite comfortably about these differences. Not like the communist wants to stab the royalist, in the heart. And then the confusion, like, well, you're an American, like, how are you a royalist? And but the conversation was not, you're a bad person because you believe this politically.
Mm.
It's a question of like, wow, tell me more. I want to hear your perspective. I may disagree with you. I may disagree with you to the death, but I'm going to let you speak.
Yeah.
That idea of, I mean, I'd never sat across the table from a professed communist, like an actual registered member of the French Communist Party, but it was just very funny to me. And just having that interaction, which is a totally forbidden interaction in America, unless we are at Thanksgiving dinner
Mm.
and then everyone gets uncomfortable because grandpa is talking about such and such. And
Mhm.
okay, we just got to deal with it because it's Thanksgiving. And,
I
that's
know.
it.
I mean, that's kind of like an aside, and I think we'll definitely have a video on this topic as a whole, just like these cultural differences. My husband and I were just talking about this the other day. The American will avoid conflict like it's the plague, but really, like truly. And I say that I'm willing to say that's like a sweeping thing. Like most Americans I
It's
know.
because we've been trained. It's not polite. It's not polite
Yeah.
to do that. So it's not even that we don't believe our beliefs. It's that you're not supposed to do that. No, it's borderline illegal. And in
Yeah.
some work contexts, it is illegal. Like, you can get fired for talking
Cool.
about some stuff. So the French do
And
not have such caution.
no, no, and again, I think I'll probably get into this a little bit more maybe on a solo episode when I talk about what it's like to be married to a French person. But sometimes even the way like my husband will bring things to me or speak to me, I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, are you like yelling at me right now? And he's like, no, like we're just having a conversation. And then, 5 seconds later, he's like, oh, I love you so much. Like it's a big, they like to debate. Like the French love to debate. And I definitely encourage people watching, if you haven't already, to read my article on the ritual of the apéro, because they just like to sit and talk and eat and drink.
And
And that's,
if you're in that context with the French, they're not going to hide anything from you. And
yeah,
I would argue, maybe this is not the right phrasing, aggressive honesty.
yeah. Well, this is a kind of another difference that my husband and I talk about quite a lot, where you meet an American out and you'll talk so much. Oh my God, we're now best friends. Let me get your phone number. We're going to hang out next week. And then you'll never hear from this person again, ever. The French person, you maybe will see them 3 or 4 times and they'll say bonjour and like slowly getting to know you. But the second they are like, oh, we're now friends, like you'll be talking existentialism at 10 a.m. over coffee. And they will tell you their entire life story. And so
Or they will come and help you move to a small medieval town in France.
yes. And it's just it's this stark difference, because I think Americans have this impression that French people are so rude and unfriendly and this and that. And it's like a French person has the impression that an American person is just so fake. So what's better? To be
and
as rude?
what's fascinating is both of those impressions are wrong.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the reaction is genuine through their cultural filter.
Mm-hmm.
In their mind, an American walking around smiling all the time and have a nice day, they imagine that is impossible. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to tell French person, like, no, they really do mean have a nice day. They're not secretly wishing you have a bad day. It's just something cultural in our system. We say that, we smile because we're like a childish people. Like we are generally like that. We're not operating. The French are moodier. They're thinking about, let's say, bigger problems. And so they see that as silly. Like, you're walking around with a smile on your face. What's wrong? Both perceptions are wrong. But once you have more information, you understand why it's wrong and why, in a sense, it's okay for them to be wrong, because they're understanding. But hopefully they progress to the other side where they say, oh, that's why you are like that. Mm-hmm. Now I see why it's silly for me to think that. Why it's silly for an American to think all French are rude, and why it's silly for French people to think all Americans are superficial. You know, we are getting close to the end of our stream, Molly, and we have not even started talking about chocolat.
I know. And I'm going to sit back and let you take the lead here, because I really don't know much about chocolate. So I'm going to be learning a little bit from you.
So you have to think about chocolate the same way that you think about coffee. There are specific parts of the world in which it is grown for reasons of suitability. You can't grow coffee everywhere in the world. You can't grow chocolate everywhere in the world. And that there are different levels of coffee and there's different levels of chocolate. And there's also a movement, as it is with coffee. I'm buying it in some place. Am I roasting it there as well? we have someone in the chat. Okay, now I'm interested. Like, didn't care about the wine, didn't care about the cheese, but your chocolate. Thank you, Antonio. I appreciate it. So with chocolate, there's obviously dark chocolate, there's milk chocolate, and as with coffee, you can taste the origin of the chocolate by the taste of it. So I was in a coffee shop recently, and I had some coffee, and it happens to have this sour note, which I love. I love this sour note, and I knew, and I said, I leaned over and I said, "Is this Ethiopian?" And she goes, she didn't know. She looked, she's like, "Yes." And that sour note at the back of the throat for Ethiopian coffee, it's much more pronounced. It was blended, so it wasn't strong, but it was strong enough that I was like, "Oh, this is definitely Ethiopian or somewhere nearby." Volcanic, so something like Laotian coffee, Vietnamese coffee is going to have some more of that. What do I want to say? Like carbonic dirt. Like you can taste some of it. Well, the same thing applies to chocolate. So chocolate, and the same thing applies to wine. Same thing applies to cheese. Like cheese is going to take on elements of where you store it. Wine is going to take on elements of where you grow it. So with chocolate, depending on how you're treating it, where you're getting it from. In Switzerland, I remember I worked in Switzerland 2 summers, like some of the favorite summers of my life. And I went out to the Lindt factory, and we learned that Lindt has some cows, their sole job in life is to produce milk that goes into chocolate. Like these are the chocolate cows, like they're designated.
I love that.
And so, well, milk chocolate is entirely different from dark chocolate. There's a sweetness, there's a blending factor. And so part of it is firstly understanding there's a milk chocolate, dark chocolate distinction. And I would say it's not analogous to sheep cheese, cow cheese, because there are people who like both. I feel milk chocolate and dark chocolate's much more sharply divided, that milk chocolate people don't like dark chocolate and dark chocolate people don't like milk chocolate. I'm an equal opportunity chocolate person, but over time, what has happened is a few Lent, like I would say maybe 8 years ago, I gave up sugar for Lent, adding sugar. So I wouldn't put sugar in my coffee.
Mhm.
What happened after Lent was things seemed really sweet to me all of a sudden
Yeah.
because for 40 days, I deprived myself of that additional sugar. Well, then I couldn't go back because I wasn't going to endure the sweetness of that. Well, what that meant was certain milk chocolates. Now, there's different European chocolates. Some of them are going to feel sweeter. So, for example, German milk chocolates to me are a little sweeter than French milk chocolates, only slightly. And then you have to decide, well, do I like that or not? So that's a question for you. But within dark chocolates, there's also a grade. Like, is it 75%? Is it 83%? And that takes you to bitterness away from sweetness. So the darker a chocolate is, the less sweet it is.
Okay.
And that dark chocolate, the darker it is, can also pair better with, let's say, a burgundy, a red wine. So when you're thinking what Molly was alluding to, it's like, well, I still have to have dessert. I still have to have chocolate. That chocolate is also finished very nicely with, let's say, a dark red. Whereas maybe something that's a little lighter, I might take a digestif with that. I might take a cognac. I said cognac, but the French don't drink cognac. Cognac is a drink by foreigners for foreigners. That's a conversation for another time. But the French drink Armagnac. So most of Armagnac is produced and drunk by the French. Very little of it is exported. Almost all the cognac is exported out of France. So I think 90+% of the cognac made in France is exported. The French don't drink cognac, they drink Armagnac, which is classic. Like the French, like, let the foreigners have whatever they want. Like, we're going to save the good stuff for ourselves. Anyway, what has been happening, and I wrote an article some time ago, maybe after the stream, I'll add it to the description, about the fact that the state of coffee in Paris is quite dire. The French don't really care about coffee as much. That's been changing over time as there's more, particularly in Paris, maybe not out in the provinces, but in Paris, there's been more people really caring about origins of beans and how they're roasting and how they're extracting. The same has been true for chocolate. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug for Plaque on Rue du Nil in the second in Paris, where they're a bean to bar chocolatier. That means that they control the entire process. So they work with the farmers, then they bring those beans, they work with it all the way through. And then that you're getting, the chocolate, the beans are from, I have one in my fridge right now from Papua New Guinea. The chocolate's from Papua New Guinea, but everything else was executed inside Paris. And really, really wonderful. And so going back to this, there are chocolate shops in Paris. That's all they sell is chocolate. And you'll go to a street. The most famous one I'm thinking of is Rue Montorgueil, also in the second. Big surprise. I lived in the second for 3 years, my favorite neighborhood in Paris. And Rue Montorgueil has 4 chocolate shops. That's all they sell.
It's not a very long route. It's not a very long route. It's not a very long street.
And then within that, you have subcategories. So at the top of the street, close to the McDonald's, you have a Belgian chocolate shop, Leonidas. And then a little further, Mère de la Famille, which is a French brand, but you would say a corporate French brand. So Mère de la Famille, you're going to go in there because you are bringing a gift for a party and you forgot. So you swing by, you get the 16-piece from La Mère de la Famille, which reasonably, I think, like 16, 20 euros tops. So you're thinking, like, this is handcrafted, pretty decent chocolate. It's corporate chocolate still, but this is the hilarious thing. Corporate chocolate in France kills. Like, amazing chocolate that you'd find in other places. I'm just speaking as an American. But you can get pretty decent corporate chocolate, but it fails to impress you once you've spent time in France. So in the beginning, like Mère de la Famille chocolates will blow your mind. Even Leonidas, because Belgian chocolate is, I would argue, a little richer, a little milkier. Conversation for another time. I don't want to think about chocolate during Lent. But you make choices about which chocolate you have, but that's because you've had a chance to try it. And that's what's so wonderful about walking around in Paris oftentimes is the chance to try things.
Hmm.
And the chocolate shop is just another example, and Molly and I will probably talk about this in a future live, of the maker culture that goes back to that taking your time idea.
Yeah.
In America, we want to back up our SUV to a Target, load up everything, and we don't want to go back for another month because it's a hassle.
Hmm.
What you discover, partially because you don't have a choice because you don't have a car and you have a very small fridge, you got to shop every 4 or 5 days.
Hmm.
Turns out when GMO is illegal, shopping for food can be delightful.
Hmm.
You shop with the seasons. You're like, oh, I guess aubergines are in season because they're everywhere.
Hmm.
And you start thinking, okay, I'm going to make stuff around this. And then seasons change. Oh, looks like plums are in season. And the way that the French express it is across everything. So when plums are in season, suddenly plums show up at a boulangerie as well in the desserts and in the pastries. And you're operating season, I would say, as God wants us to, with the seasons. And so there are times of the year you have strawberries and then you don't just have strawberries year round. Otherwise there's nothing special about it.
Hmm.
And so with this, when you're walking around Paris, there's an opportunity to try that chocolate or try this thing. And it's about educating that palate, finding out what you like or you don't like. There's no right answer. So that question, like, well, what's your favorite wine? What's your favorite cheese? What's your favorite chocolate? The French may have strong opinions, but as long as you have a backup for why you think that way, they're going to ease off. Because you'll say, I said unpopular opinion, rosé. How dare you? And they'll say, I like it. It's simple to drink. I have many fun summer memories associated with it, and I don't want something too aggressive. And I feel sometimes the white wines are not expressive enough. So they might say, well, it's summertime, have a light white. I said, I don't feel like there's enough there. They may still tease me that my palate's not educated enough, but I have enough to say that's fine. I like this, and I'm going to stand behind it. Same thing with the cheeses. Same thing with the chocolate. But you don't get there unless you've had that student mind. You've had the humility to know what you don't know and to admit it publicly. I don't know what that is. Can you tell me more? The French will love to tell you more. Go to a cheese shop. There's something else in France. When you wait in line, when your time comes, you take all the time you need.
Hmm.
So if you've been in line in the cheese shop, you get up there, you start asking about the cheesemongers like grandparents, right? Like and you don't care. And the French generally, when things get windy, the French are like irritated. And when I say windy, they make. So this is not a normal American function. We don't normally we can express frustration this way, but it is characteristically French. But it's not normal in a queue for something that's normal. So if you're in front of a meat seller, fish seller, cheese seller, they know that you waited in line, so you get to have a conversation. So they will wait in line too. And what's the rush? You live in paradise.
Yeah.
I'm doing my food shopping. And so having that conversation with the cheese person, they're going to want to dig in. There's okay. So what are you making?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, for that recipe, have you ever tried carrots? Right. And they're like, oh, I don't think about that. And they're like, okay, I want you to try this. And they'll cut a little piece of cheese for you, hand it across the counter. And you think that you're going through this special experience that's just for you. And it's just the French being French. Like, I want you to try stuff. I want to delight you. I'm proud of my country. I want to engage you. And then, potentially you'll come back and work and buy from me. I want to say a word too about wine tastings. This tends to be very ritualized in America. So I'm trying to think the most recent time I was in Oregon wine country, and you're normally going to pay $17 to $25, and they're going to bring you 3, and they're going to be enormous pours because in America we have to get value for money, and we drink. It's not tasting; it's basically a wine drinking. So they give you 3 enormous glasses of wine, charge you $25, and the idea is, if you buy wine, we'll take that off, okay, or we'll give you a portion of it. It is not that way. Generally, it's not that way. It is that way in the champagne houses, in your halls. But generally in France, when you go to do a wine tasting, firstly, it's sometimes just the owner. Like I've rolled up to places in Bordeaux country and in Burgundy where some lady is in the back with her cat. And then you're like, I'm here for a tasting, and she'll come up, and that's it. It's free. The rubric in countryside French wine tasting is you don't pay for the tasting, but you better buy something.
Yeah.
The idea that I came out here with my cat to pour this wine for you, someone is buying a bottle. And the reality is there's usually a bottle for at least like 5, 6, 7, $10. Consider that the cost of the tasting. That the rubric in France is not to charge you up front, but the expectation is you're not coming here to just taste some wine. You're going to buy some wine. And it's a fun story later on. You can say, oh, I bought this wine, from this lady. And then people will get hooked into that, and they'll find out, do I like this, etc. I still remember these girls in the Landes region in Bordeaux. They're third generation, but their father passed away. So it's been an all-female winery for many years, but it wasn't intended that way. Just their father, unfortunately, passed away when they were younger. But that led to an entire way of doing things there. And I got into really fun conversations with the winemaker, and I found out there's basically an Uber for bottling. So a lot of people don't bottle their own because you got to acquire the glass, and then you have to have a machine. So there are trucks that go around the vineyards, and they'll bottle your wine when it's ready for you. And you learn, well, you wouldn't learn that if you don't have a conversation with the winemaker. You don't have the conversation with the winemaker if you aren't willing to pull up and be the only car in the driveway and then ask. And a lot of times these winemakers will speak some kind of English if you don't. It's a great way to push you to speak your French, but a lot of times the winemakers will speak English. So feel comfortable with that.
It's honestly, I feel like the common thread here is don't be afraid to take your time. The French have a real pride in their products, if you will. They are much more, I find, deliberate in how they do things, just slower and maybe a bit more old-fashioned, but I like that. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't be watching this live. That's all I have to say.
It's like, we've been with you for an hour now. If you haven't gotten the message, I'll close that with kind of a funny video, which you all can go look for on your own. It's called Second Cheapest Wine. And it's a great little video, but it goes back to what Molly was talking about, taking your time. And I find what happened was that curiosity got infectious. I would come back to America with that, and then I would be out and I would ask people, and they wouldn't know anything about the wine. And they'd have a really expensive wine list, but none of the servers had been educated. And I was like, well, can I taste that? They're like, no, we can't. You have to buy the bottle. I was like, well, how can I buy the bottle if I haven't tasted it? Like the logic of it, right? Like, well, I need to taste it before I'm going to commit to a bottle. That logic doesn't logic, you would say. And so Second Cheapest Wine is part of that. And many comedians have made fun of it. Like, why are you looking at the wine list like you know anything? Right? Like, wrinkle your eyebrows. And so the rubric of Second Cheapest Wine is that almost everybody knows that the cheapest wine on the list is the worst. Right? So definitely don't order the cheapest. But second cheapest, now you look like you made a choice. And now you look intelligent. And so I would say, even here in America, first of all, do some research on Google or Yelp to find out if the people are knowledgeable about wines. Because those places need your business, not the place with the great wine list where nobody knows anything and the servers haven't tasted anything. And then just get curious, and they'll come out and they'll pour tastings for you. They're like, oh, I've never tried from that region. I'm very much someone who will go for regions I've never tried to try to get a sense. And then I'll try to say, well, what is it analogous to? It's the first thing I'll try in different countries. It was one of the first things I tried in Armenia, first things I tried in Georgia and Lebanon. I want to know what that is represented like in those countries. And then it's really fun to bring back a bottle, and in the closed French market, it was such a big deal when I hosted a New Zealand tasting party, a Taste of New Zealand party, where it's like, well, where'd you get these wines? Well, we can't get them here. Well, yeah, because the French tariff out. Speaking of tariffs, the French tariff North American and New World wines because they don't want them in their marketplace. And that's their right. It's their country. They can do what they want. And the French were really impressed with the New Zealand wines.
It's funny you say that. My father-in-law is always very impressed with like South American wine.
And it's in a sense easy to be impressed because they've never tried it. And so it's an opportunity for them. I mean, South American wine is so aggressive, I think, to the French palate.
Mm,
And so if they want that bolder wine, they're going to find it in South America, like particularly,
mm,
let's say, from Argentina.
mhm.
Like I think of I think of South American wine, and like it's muscular, and like it does like 60 reps in the morning, and you want them in a dark alleyway protecting you.
Yeah.
Uh, Whereas, wine from Bordeaux, it's, so much more refined, old. I'm going to help Bordeaux wine to the car. I'm going to tuck it in at night. It's never going to be that aggressive.
Mm,
That age of it, and the subtlety of it, and sometimes I feel like you're going to miss it if you're not paying attention to Bordeaux wine. Like sometimes you'll. We're getting nerdy now. All right,
yes.
so the point is, you don't have to wait to get to France to learn. I do think there are plenty of people in America who care about chocolate, who care about cheese, who care about wine. Seek it out in your area, seek it out in your municipality. Go online, learn. We're on YouTube. I can't imagine, there's so many videos that will help educate you about this stuff. And I hardly think there are many things more fun than quote unquote learning about cheese or wine or chocolate. Guess you're gonna have to try that stuff and figure it out for yourself. And as you learn about what it is that you like, you will get insights into yourself. I know it may seem trivial to think that way, but the type of cheese that you choose, the type of wine that you choose, it's like handwriting analysis. Handwriting can
Mm,
tell you a lot about who that person is. And so the types of, and it's, I wouldn't say that's neither morally good nor bad. There are types of wines, cheese, and chocolates that you like, but in the quest to know oneself better, I think any piece of information is always useful. So I will take the cheese information. Very glad.
I agree, and if not for anything, it's a fun thing to share at a party.
So remember that everything's always available on our website, theamericanimparis.com. We try to do these lives weekly. Sometimes that will be harder during the summertime when we're both on vacation. Otherwise, Molly and I both have solo videos that come out during the week, going a little bit more into specific cases and specific subjects, not as free ranging and easy as a live. And if you have ideas for topics for future lives, feel free. If you're watching this in the replay, put them in the comments, and Molly and I will take a look. And I have to say, we have to be very weird for us not to be interested in it. So we'll hope to see
Absolutely.
you on the next live. But until next time, à bientôt.
À bientôt.